With the recent running back boom, draft costs are going up, and finding the best undervalued running back at a discount has become an even bigger advantage in fantasy drafts. And so today, we are going to give you 9 running backs that are being just drafted way too low and could end up winning you your fantasy league. Dave, this is a fun one because it's not just us talking about players that we like, but maybe players that other people are too low on. So it almost forces us to go out of our comfort zone and say, I'm kind of in on this player, but really it's the draft cost that makes me say I want to pick that guy in fantasy drafts because it can be the perfect build.
100%. Yeah. And this is like the time of year where I start plugging into ADP a little bit. I've been ripping a bunch of best ball drafts now, kind of testing out all the different platforms, doing a little on Underdog, DraftKings, Drafters, kind of getting a sense for where players are getting drafted. And of course, a lot's going to change between now and Labor Day weekend or whenever you're drafting your fantasy teams. But there are some values right now that I think are just egregious. And I did an article this weekend, actually published on Monday, but we have our consensus rankings. And I think the wisdom of the crowds is a very valuable thing to have. But I did an article where I kind of talked through my process and I looked at where I did stray from our average draft position quite a bit and then try to add some context, why I like these guys more, why I don't like them quite as much as the market. And it was fun to do. And then just so happened that's the show that we're doing this week. So I'm ready to go, man. I think this is really fun, kind of talking about where we see some market inefficiencies.
Yeah, I love it when I texted you. I was like, hey, do you want to do something different? And you're like, no, I did all the research. No,
like this happens all the time where like our like show schedule matches up perfectly with my article schedule. So I'm just like ready to go. I don't even need to take notes. Like I already did all the work this weekend. I'm just ready to talk some ball now.
All right, then let's get into it then because we got 9 players. We're going to go through these a little quick because it's more players than we typically discuss on here. So why don't you kick us off, Dave, with the first guy?
DeAndre Swift. And I mean, if you've listened to the show at all, you're probably like, what is Dave doing right now, caping up for DeAndre Swift? But apparently I'm a DeAndre Swift guy right now because the market
You're a
isn't.
Swiftie.
Yeah, I'm a Swiftie through and through. It's just kind of crazy to me right now that people are looking at him as this very low end RB2 right now. I mean, RB3, his consensus ADP of RB27 is literally in RB3 range. I've got him ranked as my RB17. And trust me, I am very aware of the narrative. I was the one kind of pushing this narrative early in the offseason, like they're going to get Ashton Jinty. That didn't happen. And then it's like, well, Travion Henderson's still there. And that didn't happen. And then, oh, there's a lot of good backs on day 3. And that didn't happen. And then, well, Nick Chubb's still out there. And J.K. Dobbins is still out there. And it's like that meme, where Spider-Man is like just like missing all of the lightning bolts. That has been DeAndre Swift this offseason. And he is going in now. I mean, here we are at the end of June, and there's still no competition there. Like we got Roshan Johnson, we've got Kyle Monungai, and I think one of those guys is going to end up being in a potentially valuable role as the goal line back. But I did some digging and I was a little bit surprised because everyone remembers what Jamal Williams did that year that DeAndre Swift and Ben Johnson were together in Detroit. But there's a lot of context that goes into why Jamal Williams did that. If you look at the first 2 weeks of that season, very, very small sample size, I understand. First 2 weeks, DeAndre Swift had 28 opportunities, 262 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then he sprained his ankle. He missed the next 3 weeks. It was a bad ankle sprain, too, where they were talking about potentially having to put him under surgery. So over the rest of the season, he was a little bit limited, but still averaged 5.3 targets per game. He was very involved as a pass catcher. So I look at it right now. The work in Chicago has to go somewhere. This is a much improved offensive line. They've got good wide receivers that are going to be able to pull the defensive gravity. This is a situation where DeAndre Swift, whether it's as a rusher or as a pass catcher, there's going to be volume there. And it is crazy to me that he's being valued the way he is on a per game basis. That 1 year that he had in 2022 with Ben Johnson, this is going to shock you, Alfredo. He was the per game RB12 that year. And everyone remembers.
I'm shocked.
The touchdowns from Jamal Williams, but DeAndre Swift, when he was out there, was very effective in Ben Johnson's offense. So I didn't expect to be this high on DeAndre Swift compared to the consensus, but just a great, great value in drafts right now.
Yeah, I think the thing that I want to know, because you and I are both relatively high on him. I've got him at running back 21. You're at running back 17. We both see him as a solid RB2. He's a starter on a good offense. And there's another guy. The next guy I'm going to talk about is the same thing. And I'm just curious as to, let us know in the comments, right? If you're watching here on YouTube, what do you see with DeAndre Swift where you're saying, I don't want to take that risk of drafting him ahead of that RB27 ADP. So because he's falling pretty deep down the rankings. Dave, we're talking about a guy going in round 7. If that's where I can get my RB2 for my team, I'm all in on that.
And like we're scared off by Kyle Monangai? Like is that why? I don't really get it either.
I
Like
mean, he runs
I
crazy.
don't give like 3 months ago, I was very anti DeAndre Swift because I thought that he would get pushed to the back burner for another running back,
Right.
but it hasn't happened. And like, what are they going to do? Call up like Jamal Williams, 31 years old, or Todd Gurley? Like, there's nobody else available. Like, they're going into the season with what they have right now, and DeAndre Swift is atop that depth chart.
Yeah, man. I listen. I love this pick here. I think that ADP will continue to rise as we get a little bit closer because I do think that we're not the only fantasy. Just shocker, by the way, we're not the only fantasy analysts that can be right about things and wrong about things and have differing opinions. I've seen a lot of people that are really jumping. Heath Cummings, former football guy, works over at CBS Fantasy Football Today, is just pounding the drum right now for DeAndre Swift, saying, why aren't we drafting him higher? It makes no sense. So yeah, I think that's going to go up a little bit. Now, we got 8 more players that we're going to talk about here. Before we do that, just want to remind everybody, you've got a bunch of ways you can enjoy this show. First is right here on YouTube. So if you're watching this video, take a second to like this video, comment down below, make sure you're subscribed to the channel because we're going to be doing this all summer, right into fantasy football draft season. And then throughout the season, we're going to be with you every single week, multiple times a week. So make sure you're subscribed, you hit the notification bell. And then if you're listening over on Apple or Spotify, if you could just take a second right now, as you're listening to this podcast, go back to that main podcast page and leave a review. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. A 5-star review means so much to us. It puts our podcast in front of more people. It gets us more downloads. Isiah Pacheco.
Yes.
Running back.
Isiah Pacheco.
Kansas City Chiefs. I'm just surprised at where consensus has him in ADP. Dave, I'm a little surprised at where you have him on your rank. And I think a lot of that you will answer later with another player that you're going to talk about. But Isiah Pacheco, I've got him at running back 24. And consensus ADP has him at running back 29, which is having him go around that round 7 to 8 turn. And this is a guy that last year we were drafting as a high-end RB2, some even a low-end RB1. It's a good offense. It's a good player. I know it was a small sample size from last year. 21 opportunities per game to start out that season before he breaks his leg. In 2023, he's the running back 14 in points per game. I'm not sure what we're basing these rankings or this average draft position on. Is it how he looked when he came back? Because to come back from a broken leg in 9 weeks is insane. But to do it and then come into your toughest 5-game stretch of the season and then have to go compete against playoff-worthy NFL teams is even tougher. Because he's not the only one that struggled. Kareem Hunt also struggled in this backfield as well. And I feel like I might be alone on an island here, that I'm sitting here saying Isiah Pacheco is still a good football player. I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt. Dave, unfortunately, I'm not worried about Brashard Smith. Like, he was a 7th-round guy. He's a converted wide receiver who I know he might have some passing game usage in there. We rarely see 7th-round guys, do much in their first year. They didn't do much in free agency, the Chiefs. They went out and got Elijah Mitchell, who I know he had a flash there while he was in San Francisco, but we haven't seen much from him either in his career. Isiah Pacheco continues to be the top guy on this roster, 5 yards per carry throughout his career. He's a workhorse when he's healthy. To me, when we're looking at when he's healthy, when he's playing versus last year, we have the freak injury. I think we're just getting an injury discount right now. Last year and the poor efficiency after the broken leg, to me, appears to be the big outlier.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't want to sit here and be like anti-Isiah Pacheco. I'm very much so just kind of agreeing with the market on where he is. I think the reason people are a little bit lower on him is because Kareem Hunt is there, and we have seen Andy Reid kind of deploy this committee approach basically throughout his entire career. So I think that's kind of the fear now is he trusts Kareem Hunt. Again, I don't want to be like the anti-Pacheco guy. I mean, Kareem Hunt doesn't have like the big play upside, but he's good at mitigating losses. He's good at finding the hole and, doing the gritty things that NFL coaches like, which funny enough, that's a lot of the same things that Isiah Pacheco does.
Yeah, again, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I don't want to be like the anti-Pacheco guy, and that's definitely not what I'm trying to do here. But the reason I have him kind of ranked where the market does, I think the common thought with Pacheco is that he's going to get a lot of early down work, and we know that we love the idea of like the goal line back in a Kansas City offense, but we also know that Andy Reid just like loses his mind when he gets inside the 5-yard line, and where he should just like turn around and give the ball to Isiah Pacheco, they're going to be running double reverses with like a pass out to Juju Smith-Schuster or whatever. Like they do weird things around the goal line, and I think that's what's especially frustrating. I'm okay taking him at cost, but not a guy that I'm trying to like reach for in drafts.
Interesting. Because I'm absolutely willing to take him right now. He's going in that round 7-8 turn. I'm absolutely willing to take him around earlier in round 6. You're telling me that I can go and get, 2 running backs and 3 receivers prior to him and have him be my running back 3 there in round 6. Like I'm pretty happy with that build, especially if you've got the upside of that Chiefs offense. So I don't know. I know there's like the worry he might not be the passing down back. I think he's still going to be out there plenty. Like I just nothing. Kareem Hunt wasn't even on the Chiefs last year until Isiah Pacheco got hurt. There's just like there's not enough around there that like. So I'm the opposite way. I'm not caping for him too hard, but there's just not enough around him that gets me worried that he's not going to have a major role in this team. I guess like for him to be as a running back 3, similar to DeAndre Swift. Like I don't think these players deserve to be considered as RB3s in fantasy football.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned the pass catching. That is a little bit of a worry of mine. I looked over Andy Reid's entire tenure since he took over as the Chiefs head coach in 2013. Yeah. Isiah Pacheco is 3rd in rushing attempts, and he's 8th in targets. When you look at the other guys that are up there, Jamal Charles and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those guys were both heavily involved in the passing and receiving game, where it does seem like Andy Reid does want to just kind of lean on Pacheco as a runner and not utilize him quite as much as a pass catcher. And that's why one of the guys that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, I think, may stumble into that role. But again, like Isiah Pacheco, fine football player, and I think that he's valued right where he should be. I have no qualms with taking him where he's being drafted.
Yeah, I think I just still lean that Pacheco can do it. I mean, 44 receptions back in 2023, and like it's not that he can't be the receiving guy. We'll digress. I just think that where he's at right now, to me, makes him a value in drafts. And so if you can get him prior to that ADP, I think that's an absolute win because you've got a guy that has that top 15 upside that we've seen before. All right, let's go to the next guy. Dave, talk to us about J.K. Dobbins, running back for the Denver Broncos.
First of all, I want like a disclaimer here. I like RJ Harvey. Me saying that J.K. Dobbins is a good value in draft is not me besmirching the
Fantasy
name.
Football is so political right now.
Oh, it's crazy, man. Like, I come out here and I'm just like, hey, J.K. Dobbins is a good, and I know the comments are going to be like, oh, Dave,
why do you
RJ
hate
Harvey?
Yep.
I'm above consensus on RJ Harvey too. And the reason why I'm going to explain it here is I think that drafters right now are just so certain that RJ Harvey is going to be the pass catching back, the Alvin Kamara, the Reggie Bush type of player. And I've said that I think that he can be that guy. And then they think that J.K. Dobbins is going to be the Mark Ingram, the Deuce McAllister, that early down grinder. And that's probably the way that things are going to shake out. But what if we're wrong? I mean, we're wrong all the time right now. And when I'm looking at it, I just think that J.K. Dobbins, J.K. Dobbins, his ADP doesn't even take into consideration that we could be wrong about how this backfield is going to shake out. And RJ Harvey, again, I've talked about it. Big fan of the player, was all over him pre-draft, loved the landing spot, all these things. But there was one big wart on his profile, and that was his abilities as a pass blocker. He was graded by PFF as one of the worst pass blocking running backs coming into this class. And Sean Payton, just a couple of days ago, said that's something that they're working on, and he wants to get him more involved as a pass blocker. But Dobbins could be the guy who takes over as that early passing down back because he already excels as a pass blocker. We've seen it back since he was in college. This guy's a very, very good pass blocker. We saw him doing it last year in Los Angeles as well. And I just think that there is a world, there's a possibility where J.K. Dobbins comes out as a better pass blocker and he just gets dropped right into that Javonte Williams role from last year that provided 70 targets. And if you're telling me J.K. Dobbins is going to see 70 targets plus some early down work as well, he's going to smash that ADP. We got to remember, former second-round pick. Injuries have kind of wrecked his career so far, but just turned 26 years old. Finally got one injury, well, not injury-free, but didn't suffer a major injury last year, which we really like to see. So I much prefer RJ Harvey in drafts, and I have him ranked well ahead of J.K. Dobbins. But if I'm in a draft and I don't get RJ Harvey, I'm okay reaching for J.K. Dobbins a round or two early on the off chance that maybe we're wrong about this situation. J.K. Dobbins is actually the more valuable back in this offense.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of J.K. Dobbins early in the season because these running backs, it typically can be one of the positions that's easiest to get into in the NFL because there's not a whole lot that changes schematically.
Right.
Understanding where you need to run, having the patience and the vision to do so, and then the big playability to make something happen. However, there are going to be assignments that RJ Harvey is probably not used to and a run scheme that he's not used to. So it will take a little bit of time. J.K. Dobbins is probably going to be a guy that's going to be getting a lot more work early in the season, and those RJ Harvey managers might be panicking a little bit. I don't think it's crazy to assume that RJ Harvey might be one of those guys that managers are dropping in like week 2 or 3 when they make the big panic
100%.
waiver wire pickup, where
Justin Jefferson all over again.
Yep. Well, never. This was such a wasted pick, and they go and get the flavor of the week on the waiver wire, drop him, and all of a sudden it's like week 7 or 8, and we're saying RJ Harvey is the number 1 waiver wire pickup. That's exactly how it goes.
I'm telling you right now, do not drop RJ Harvey for Najee Harris under any circumstances.
Travis Etienne, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've got him as my running back 29. Dave, you're higher. You got him at running back 28.
I told you,
And
full circle, man. I think this was like my RB like 51 a couple of months ago, but we'll talk about it.
By the way, you saying full circle just like made me realize one of my favorite memes where it's just like, yep, we're going to turn this thing around full 360 degrees. It's Jason Kidd talking about it.
Yes.
It's like, nope. My dad did that the other day where he's like, yeah, I've changed my life 360 degrees. I'm like, you mean 180 degrees? It's just like, shut up, man. But yeah, Travis Etienne. Hopefully it's not 360 degrees. It's 180 degrees. Back to what we have seen before. Right now, consensus average draft position has him at running back 36, going in the 10th round. And man, if we thought that the other guys we mentioned here, Dobbins and Pacheco and Swift, were discounts, Travis Etienne is I would think the ultimate discount right now at running back. To me, he's the cheapest starting NFL running back you can get in a fantasy draft outside of maybe the Cowboys backfield, and that's because it's just the starters for the Cowboys are not very good right now. That's a little bit of a tease for later, by the way. Just stick around for the rest of this video. The difference with ETN is that like versus all the guys around him in ADP, we've seen him be a top 3 guy, a top 5 guy, and do it for fantasy. He was a top 3 fantasy running back in 2023. The year before that, he was running back 17 as a rookie in 2022. And that's been with all the weird ups and downs of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the coaching changes and the offensive scheme changes, the injuries and the poor offensive line and everything that has gone on. I look at the running backs around him. Tank Bigsby is fine. He's not, I don't think he's a great NFL running back by any means, and he's really not going to see himself out there on passing downs. Bashaw Tutin, I know, is the flavor of the week right now in Jacksonville, and he absolutely has the ability to explode. I think he's a really fun player. He's a track guy. He's got the speed. He can be a Raheem Mostert-esque player. He's another one of these guys with fumble issues. He's not a good pass blocker. He's not great in the passing game itself. Travis Etienne kind of fits exactly what Liam Cohen wants to do. And everywhere Cohen has been, he's revitalized that run game, whether it's been last year in Tampa or even go back to the college ranks where he did this with Ray Davis at Kentucky and then back with the Rams. Like he has been doing this year after year everywhere he's been. You've got Travis Etienne in a contract year. Teams tend to maximize usage in those seasons. So could Tutin be a guy that maybe late in the season comes on and gets a few more carries, and could he potentially have that Bucky Irving like breakout late in the season? It's all very possible. But we talked about this before when we talked about Bucky Irving, that Rachaad White was super valuable for a lot of the year. Travis Etienne could be extremely valuable and then just keep that job and remain very valuable. And where you're getting him in the 10th round, potentially as your RB4, there's little to no risk involved in your fantasy draft here.
Yeah, and you talk about it, man. Like everybody talks about how Bucky Irving took over the backfield last year. I looked at it. If you look at like Bucky Irving's breakout over the second half of the season, during that time, Rachaad White was still averaging 11 attempts and 3.3 targets per game. Like he wasn't just a complete afterthought. He wasn't benched for Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving was ripping off the fun, exciting plays on the highlights, but Rachaad White was still plenty involved. And the big thing for me is, again, we try to like look at our crystal ball and imagine how the offseason is going to shake out. And, there was a lot of talk about Travis Etienne being a potential trade candidate. He was from the old regime, and this team went out and they drafted Bashal Tutin and like Tank Bigsby and all that. But for me, it was as simple as just a comment from Liam Cohen where they asked him about the trade murmurs surrounding Travis Etienne, and he's like, I don't know where that's coming from. That's coming from outside the organization. We have no plans to trade Travis Etienne. He's going to be great at this offense, and really steamed him up. And I said, okay, well that's kind of all I needed to hear, because I do have some concerns about Bashal Tutin as a runner. Great straight line speed. We love that, but not the most agile guy. You talked about the fumbling issues. Tank Bigsby, a really good backup, but I think if there's one guy that can really excel in this, it is Travis Etienne. So I've moved him up quite a bit. He's a guy that I'm aggressively targeting in drafts right now, and it's one of those where I think people are still, much like DeAndre Swift, holding on to these preconceived notions from early in the offseason where we thought they'd get traded or we thought they'd get replaced, and they haven't, but the markets still haven't really reacted to the fact that there's some security here.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bashal Tutin stuff, and I know he's one of these hot names that everyone has been really excited about, and a lot of that I think just stems from the fact that he ran a fast 40, and that was
100%.
it.
Nobody knew his
It was
name before the combine.
I remember talking with a friend of the show, Theo Greminger, and went on his podcast at the time, and he was like, "Well, what do you think about Bashal Tutin?" And this was like a week before the combine, and I was like, he's fine. He's probably like my running back 15 in this draft class. I don't really love the film. And he's like, "Oh, I heard he's going to blow up the combine. He's some people's RB3 or 4 in this class." And I was like, "Really?" And then it happened at the combine. Yep. Blew it up, and he just went shooting up draft boards. And then it's kind of been one of these things that like we've taken whatever happens to Bashal Tutin and make it a positive. And you can do that with anyone in fantasy. You can do that we did it right now with Travis Etienne, with all the other guys.
Out now in camp, so he's not going to do it in the regular season.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a million ways that we can right. Pretty this up for these players. Could Bashal Tutin be the guy that just makes tremendous strides throughout the season? Absolutely. The better bet right now, based on where they're going in fantasy drafts, to me, still remains Travis Etienne. I think we're both on the same page with that.
100%, yeah.
All right, let's go to the next guy here. This is a fun one, Dave. I'm curious to see what you're going to say about this next player. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody, not just this show, but Football Guys has so many great podcasts with a ton of great analysts and creators here. We've got the Dynasty Show with Dave Kluge and Jeff Bell, the Audible, the long-standing Football Guys podcast, the Audible. That's our cornerstone. 19 years, man. Crazy. 19 years. They can get drafted for World War III.
I could stop myself, but...
Yep. The hot seat with Bob Harris, man. Like that's another, like these are legends of the fantasy football industry who are here. We've got On the Couch with Sigmund Bloom, where he's got a new guest every week. Dave, you've got the Launchpad where you also have a new guest every single week. Just tons of great content over here at Football Guys. So make sure you're not only just checking out the website, footballguys.com, where we still have the rookie guide available for you. We got a bunch of other cool stuff coming out. We got the Football Guys magazine that's going to be hitting shelves and going to be in your inbox. So check that with your newsletter and, all these podcasts. They're so great. All right. I think I set this up nicely for you to come in here and talk about a fun player, a rookie, a young guy with some excitement. Dave, talk to us about Brashard Smith, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and I wanted to start off the show with some guys that I think are just like undervalued. But when you told me about the show we were doing, you said we're talking about running backs that nobody is talking about, and nobody's really talking about Brashard Smith. I mean, we've got our ADP that goes over 300 players deep, and correct me if I'm wrong. No, Brashard Smith is in that one. All right, we'll get to some guys who aren't even ranked a little bit later in the show, but RB 65 right now, and I've got him as my RB 50, so a couple of rounds ahead of where he's getting drafted. And I like your Isiah Pacheco take. I do. Like I said, I'm right there with the market. I think that he is a fine pick where he's going, but I can argue that Brashard Smith has the higher ceiling right now and is going way, way, way cheaper. And of course, it's June. We don't know how things are going to shake out. Like, he might not even make the team. This is a 7th-round rookie, and he's fighting an uphill battle to get there. But he's one of those guys right now that you can draft in round 18 of your best ball drafts. You can get him in round 4 of your dynasty drafts. If for whatever reason you're doing a redraft draft this early in the season, you can get him in the final round without anybody else even thinking twice about it. And I talked about it, that Isiah Pacheco, very good in the running game, but he hasn't really been heavily involved as a pass catcher the way that we've seen some other guys in these Andy Reid offenses. So I see what Kareem Hunt did when he was younger, and Jerick McKinnon, of course, and Jamal Charles, these guys that were just target magnets coming out of the backfield. And Brashard Smith is a converted wide receiver who is going to potentially make the team as that pass catching running back. And that's it. I just want to bet on the guy who is going to be able to catch passes. That's something that we haven't really seen in this Chiefs offense over the last couple of years. So might not even make the team, but he's a free guy right now that you can get late in your dynasty drafts, last round of your best ball drafts. And I think the upside bet is worth it. Of course, we've fallen for this trap before, right? Like I'm old enough to remember Darwin Thompson. This time, a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about Darwin Thompson, a late round pick that could potentially be that game breaking guy, and he never even saw the field. That could be the way that Brashard Smith goes as well. But again, I want to take cheap shots and ways that I can get in on this Chiefs offense. And I think Brashard Smith is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Brashard Smith, I feel the same way that you feel about Isiah Pacheco, where I'm cool with him at cost. I'm not going to get overweight on Brashard Smith on drafts. He's not a guy that I'm actively targeting. Just the hit rate with 7th rounders is not great. The hit rate with converted wide receivers to running backs is not great. I know we've seen it where we see guys like Antonio Gibson and Tony Pollard and Tyrone Tracy. But where we kind of look at these guys as the blueprint, when in reality, at least to me, I sort of see that becomes the outlier where they're good for a slew of games, maybe even a season. And that could happen with Brashard Smith. I'm not saying late round picks, especially on the Chiefs, don't work out. That's what Isiah Pacheco was. I get it.
Exactly.
Or was he undrafted? I actually don't remember.
He was a 7th rounder. He was a 7th rounder. Pick 246 if I remember.
Yeah, so I get it. It could work. It seems like there's more of an uphill battle for him, and he wasn't a guy that I was particularly in love with on film. So that's the only reason why I just kind of stay at ADP, and I'm not, banging the table for Brashard Smith. But everything you said about the receiving upside, where he could be, the Chiefs offense, all that, it makes sense. So I'm not going to
drafted after Kareem Hunt, Alfredo. That's crazy, right? It's crazy to have
is it?
Kareem Hunt ahead of
because
Brashard
if you're
Smith.
worried about Kareem Hunt taking stuff from Pacheco, doesn't it make sense that Kareem Hunt will get drafted before Brashard Smith?
See, when I'm at this point in the draft,
360 degrees, Dave. 360 degrees.
When I'm looking at this point in the draft, RB50, RB60, RB70, sure. Can Kareem Hunt sitting at RB60 outperform his ADP?
Right.
Of course he can. But if you draft the RB60 and you're getting RB48 production, does that really matter? That's still not a guy you want to put in your lineup. So I'm swinging for ultimate upside at this point in the draft. When I get to the final rounds, I'm not looking for guys that have any projectable volume. I'm looking for guys that are an injury away from a big workload, or a guy who can just stumble into a very valuable role. That's it with Brashard Smith. I already said he might not even make the team. We'll get a clearer picture as training camp opens. But we have seen that pass catching role in an Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes offense. We saw it with Jerick McKinnon, where he was just printing RB12 production. He was just top 12 running back every single week. And Pacheco was still smashing during that point, if you remember. There was a month at the end of the season where both of these guys were giving us top 10, top 12 production. So I don't even think that liking Brashard Smith is necessarily an indictment on Isiah Pacheco. They play such different roles that I think both of these guys could actually outperform their ADP if the situation falls right.
Yeah, the Chiefs are one of these teams, like a house of cards, honestly, where their whole roster is just guys who get injured, and we don't quite know what their identity is going to be. We just know that, hey, Patrick Mahomes is there and he's really good. And sometimes he's not really good. He's not even that great for fantasy all the time. Travis Kelce, not great with Rashee Rice there. I think all these guys on the Chiefs have some great contingent upside. And if they're falling to you in drafts, I think that's the real lesson, the real takeaway from this is whether it's Pacheco, Smith, Hunt, the receivers, Marquise Brown, I'm sure is going to end up being a value at the wide receiver spot. That's just where we're probably going to be with a lot of these Chiefs players. All right, let's go to the next guy here. Talk about contingent upside. And this is another one of these guys that just has it in spades right now. And it's Jordan Mason, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. And I've got him at my running back 39. Dave, you're a little bit lower. You got him at running back 49, just outside of that, that top 48 range. Consensus ADP has Jordan Mason at running back 41, which puts him in the 10th round. I would say this, if I'm comparing him directly to Travis Etienne, who's also going in the 10th round, I'm going to take Etienne. But if Etienne goes a round or two before that, and I'm sitting there in the 10th round saying, okay, which running backs give me the upside that I'm looking for out of a handcuff or what he's being called, which is the 1B in this backfield, then yeah, it's Jordan Mason for me. Aaron Jones is 30 years old. He's coming off a season where he got a career high 306 touches. He played a full season for just the second time in his career. He was 7th in touches last season. Typically, these guys that hit over 300 touches in a year, we tend to see it take a toll on their bodies, especially Aaron Jones, a guy who has found injuries have found him, a lot throughout his career. And at 30 years old, this is where we start to see the drop off on a lot of these guys. He could very well still be extremely productive in the receiving game. And that's something that I do expect to see and have himself still a nice role in this Minnesota Vikings offense. JJ McCarthy probably going to be checking that ball down a bit. They're going to be committing to the run. But even with all those touches last year, he was running back 19 in fantasy points per game. I imagine the offense is probably going to be a little bit worse under JJ McCarthy. It could be better, but I think we're looking at a guy like Aaron Jones, who's probably going to get that touch count reduced a little bit. And if we do expect that number to go down, and we do expect more of a commitment to the running game with JJ McCarthy under center, I could see Jordan Mason finishing with a higher number of touches than he had last year, probably closer to like that 200 touch number that Brian Robinson had, with Austin Eckler being on the field and with the passing game taking off in Washington. And there's also that upside. If Aaron Jones misses any time, Jordan Mason started 7 games last year. He averaged 106 total yards per game in those starts. The offensive line is much improved in Minnesota, and the Vikings essentially traded a 5th round pick for Jordan Mason when he was a restricted free agent. That's just not something that you see happen all that often. So you have to assume when a team does something like this, it's because they have a plan in mind. So Jordan Mason to me is a guy that has a ton of contingent upside on an offense that I think, even with a rookie quarterback, could be really good for fantasy running backs.
I've got a huge just like group from RB 35 to RB 49 that Mason falls into, where it's just all the injury away stashes. And I think that there's a lot of guys that I like that are an injury away. I have heard a lot of people talking about like they expect Jordan Mason to just be involved with like some standalone value. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he could be involved enough that we don't see Aaron Jones 6th in weighted opportunities again, like he was last year. So I think that there's enough involvement that it could potentially cap Aaron Jones's upside, but I think that he would need an injury to really find a path to fantasy relevance. And you know,
isn't that where we
really
are with all these guys?
Yeah.
When we get to like that RB4 category, they're all an injury away.
Right. So some of the guys I have ahead of him, you know, Miles Sanders, Isaac Orendo, Blake Corum, Ramondre Stevenson, Tyler Algier, Austin Eckler, also guys that have like no projectable volume, but if an injury does happen, they can stumble into a workload. And I think the one fear that I have, and I just can't get this thought out of the back of my head with Jordan Mason, is that the 49ers last year, like they did trade him away. He was an undrafted guy. Like they struck gold finding a guy that was performing well in that role. But if you look, the production did start to wane as the season went on. And then the fact that they were willing to move off of him, and they moved off him immediately. Like we didn't even get word that Christian McCaffrey was healthy or anything like that. As soon as the season ended, they traded him away. And we did see some inefficiencies with Isaac Orendo last year. Christian McCaffrey getting up there in age. That's just the one thought that I can't shake, is like the San Francisco 49ers, who always like to have a deep corral of running backs, were willing to move off of Jordan Mason for relatively cheap. It makes me wonder if maybe they saw something up close that made them think, you know, well, let's just take the pick and move off from this guy. That's just the one thing that I can't shake from my mind, is why the 49ers were willing to move on from him.
Isaac Orendo was fantastic last year. And he had more big playability than Mason did. So like, I know they're both kind of, Mason was sort of like the guy that had the size but didn't have the big playability, and he was giving you the consistent yards. Whereas I think Orendo was still giving them the consistent yards and the big playability with that. They went and they drafted Jordan James in the NFL draft this year. I believe it was a 5th round pick. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I don't necessarily look at it as like, oh, they were willing to move on from, there's got to be something wrong with him. I look at it as he was signed to a restricted free agent tender. The Vikings went out of their way to be like, hey, here's a 5th round pick for this guy. And they're like, oh, that's probably the most we're ever going to get for him. And we still got Garindo, and we can go and draft a pick later. And so I don't know. I think it's one of those eye of the beholder things. You can look at it as like, oh, the Niners got rid of him, but you can also look at it as the Vikings went out of their way to go get him. So I choose the latter because it fits my argument. All right, we got 3 more players here. We'll try to make these ones a little bit quicker. Dave, talk to us about Tahj Brooks.
Yeah, this is one that I think ADP just has wrong. Right now, Tahj Brooks is being ranked behind Zach Moss. And I hate to say this because, you know, we never want to see players like ending their careers on a bad note or anything like that. But like there's murmurs that Zach Moss might not even be able to play again right now. Like, I think it's more likely that he gets cut than it is that he walks in as the RB2 here. And last year, if you look at the way the season started in Cincinnati, it was very much so a committee where we saw a mix of Zach Moss and we saw Chase Brown in there. And I think that's what Zach Taylor wants to do. But they ended up in a position where they had no running back depth, and Zach Moss was abruptly injured. And even after the injury, we see the Bengals never make in-season trades, and they traded for Khalil Herbert. Like, they wanted to add depth behind Chase Brown. And if you remember, Alfredo, the first time that they tried giving the ball to Khalil Herbert, he coughed it up and fumbled the ball, and that was it. From there on out, it was the Chase Brown show. Another running back wasn't even stepping on the field. So this is similar to Jordan Mason. Like, I don't think that there's going to be standalone value here. I think Jordan Mason, or I think Tahj Brooks is going to be an annoying thorn in the side of those who draft Chase Brown. But what it comes down to is I think Tahj Brooks is going to be the RB2 here. Like last year, Samaje Perine, good at what he does. He's a good pass blocker, good pass catcher, but we saw him with two teams last year, and he just, I hate to use the term washed, but he looked pretty washed. Like, Samaje Perine wasn't bringing much to the table last year. Zach Moss now looking at, the potential end of his career. Tahj Brooks, if he's the RB2 here, probably not a lot of standalone value, but the upside is literally Chase Brown just last year. Chase Brown, another workhorse in college, a day 3 back who slid a little bit because of age. That's pretty much the same profile as Tahj Brooks. Chase Brown does have some breakaway speed that I think Tahj Brooks doesn't have, but really, this is an injury away guy right now that is being drafted as an injury away from an injury away guy, and I think that the market is just wrong here. So I'm way higher on Tahj Brooks. I expect him to go into week 1 as the team's RB2, and right now you don't have to pay up for him like that. Like, he's not being drafted as the RB2 on a good offense. He's just a complete afterthought in drafts right now, and a guy that I'm still aggressively trying to get at the end of my drafts.
Yeah, this is one of these where I kind of just stick to my rookie evaluation, where I didn't love Tahj Brooks, and you and I had this conversation a lot in the offseason. And you mentioned you see him as an injury away guy while people are drafting him as an injury from an injury away guy. And that's kind of more where I see him too. It's like, even if he is, let's say there is no Zach Moss, I do feel like even if Chase Brown goes down, there's going to be a Samaje Perine, Tahj Brooks, and oh, look, we picked up another guy off the street sort of thing where we're going to let all of them. Now, Tahj Brooks could very well be the most explosive back out of that group. And that was something that he did have when he was at Texas Tech. And Samaje Perine, like you mentioned, a little bit older. It's not the same type of explosive player. There's not a risk, I guess, as to where you're drafting him, right? Like, he's an undrafted, like, last round pick in most fantasy football leagues. So there's no risk there. He's just one of those handcuffs with some upside. I think what's more likely, he ends up being one of those guys that lingers on the waiver wire until there's a Chase Brown injury. And I think that's probably, he's one of those guys that he'll probably show up again on our episode that we do prior to week 1, where we say, go pick up these guys off the waiver wire before week 1 starts, like after your fantasy football drafts. And he'll probably be there with a lot of other good handcuff running backs.
Yeah, and I think he does need an injury, but this is a guy, he handled a massive workload when he was in college. Omarion Hampton, the only other running back that's had 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. Over the last 2 years, only Ashton Jeanty has more carries than Tahj Brooks did. So much like Chase Brown, I mean, I remember saying the same thing about Chase Brown last offseason, saying draft this guy for cheap because you look, only Bijan Robinson had more touches than him. The Bengals definitely have a type, and that's a guy who can handle a big workload and isn't going to break down. That's what they found in Chase Brown a couple of years ago, and I think that's what they found in Tahj Brooks again this year.
We shall see. I'll definitely say Tahj Brooks, a good pass blocker, better than most people give him credit for. So there could be a role for him on passing downs. Mm-hmm. The tough thing is that also means you're taking Chase Brown off the field, who is also good in passing down. So right. I'll be curious to see if there is an offense I'd like to target. It is the Bengals. They have that good passing game. They have a really bad defense. So this makes sense here. I'm going to talk about another rookie running back who I think has some tremendous upside, and it's Jaydon Blue, running back for the Dallas Cowboys. I've got him as my running back 43, just a little bit above consensus ADP at running back 47. Dave, you're lower. You got him at running back 56. Right now, Blue's going in the 12th round of fantasy drafts, and that'll likely change depending on how the offseason reports go. If we get a whole thing on how he's crushing camp and one of those viral videos circulates around because he's got this speed, that ADP is going to skyrocket up. But he's going in the same 12th round as Brashard Smith right now. And this is a guy that I think I prefer over Tootin. He does all the exact same things. Even the fumbling, just like Brashard Smith, but he's so much better on passing downs. He's a good receiver. He's a good pass blocker. That was something that he was used at. He He was used that way a lot at Texas in college, and he was just a big play merchant, man. 4.28 40 at his pro day. That was best in the class. He's got speed and balance. The 73% of his rushing yards came after contact, best in the class as well. And then this 25% target share is just excellent. You don't see that all that often for running backs to be in the 20s like that. He was lining up in the slot a ton. And if that's something where Brian Schottenheimer says, man, I really want to get creative with my running backs, I think that he's looked at as a guy that Schottenheimer, that is mostly a run the ball a lot type of offensive coordinator or offensive mind. And that's not really the case. Like we've seen it where he's had a pass heavy attack with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys before in the past. And so I think there's going to be some creative ways that he wants to use these running backs. Miles Sanders was a guy you mentioned before. Javonte Williams, the other running back there. And I think it's a struggle to try to make a case for either of them being really fantasy relevant other than just saying they're on the team and there's not a starter. Well, if that's the case and there's this three-headed attack, like let's go with the rookie that has the 4.28 speed, the high receiving ceiling. There's actually an opportunity here. He's in the same archetype, and please, like, don't make this a direct comp where he could be the Devon Etienne for this Dallas Cowboys team where Dak Prescott can dump off to him. He can make the big plays. We've seen that Schottenheimer and the Cowboys are willing to move on from inefficient running backs. Schottenheimer in particular, you go back, there was a cool study done by Jacob Gibbs where he looked back and he's like, Schottenheimer went to Chris Carson when the starting running back was struggling. He went to Tony Pollard when the starting running back was struggling. He went to Rico Dowdle when the starting running back was struggling. If we get even just 2 weeks of Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders struggling, Jaydon Blue is the guy for the season. And there's not many guys like Jaydon Blue on this roster with the speed, with the receiving ability. So yeah, I really love the opportunity for him here. I think the talent could actually just give you so much in return on your fantasy investment that you make here. But I'd be remiss if I don't say the fumbling thing is an issue. And so he is one of these guys that a couple fumbles in a game, and that's it. You might not see him again. So that is an inherent risk you have. But as a 12th round pick, I'm not super worried about it.
Yeah, I get the HN comp. That's not one I've heard before, but I do like that. He's got the size or he's got the speed. He's a little bit undersized.
He's undersized, yeah.
Yeah, so I do get that comp for sure. And I have Miles Sanders ahead of Jaydon Blue, and that's where I feel like you have to kind of take a stance on this Dallas backfield when you're ranking these. And I've got Javonte Williams ranked first, then Miles Sanders behind him, and then Jaydon Blue behind him. And I am kind of coming around though to what you're selling here. That Jaydon Blue would have the highest upside of the bunch. It's just when I watch him, an undersized guy that really struggles to, especially through contact, and I do worry about how that's going to translate to the NFL game. So I long term, I like him. If he's able to beef up, if he's able to be a little bit more physical. But right now, I think he's one of those guys that needs to just kind of get outside and hit the home run. And that's kind of what he has in his game, which could work out. Like Dynasty, I'm taking a chance here because Sanders and Javonte Williams are both on short-term contracts and the door could open up next year. But this year, I'm tempering expectations a little bit for Jaydon Blue.
He's certainly a zone runner. And that's one of the things, like when you have the speed like this, you are looking to get outside. Schottenheimer runs a lot of that inside zone. And so if he's just going to keep trying to pound running backs between the guards, that's not going to work out great. But Blue has that speed and agility to make guys miss, especially in the zone scheme. And that's what's worked for him with so much of his yards after, so much of his rushing yards last year coming after contact, best in the class at 73%. I don't want to say that he struggles to get through contact because the numbers would say different, but obviously with the size, if he's being used the wrong way, that's where I think we could run into a big problem here. And if that's what ends up happening with these running backs, we're just like, okay, we need you to be the hammer. Well, then, yeah, that's not going to work. We saw Mike McDaniel did that last year with Devon Etienne, where he's like, Here you go, kid, run up the middle 3 times in a row. He just kept spamming HB slam, like a Madden play. And it just didn't work. So if that happens here, yeah, I'd be a little bit more concerned with Jaydon Blue. But we're talking about guys that are getting drafted in the 12th round.
And if they can draw up some plays that I think would work with his skill set, get him some outside pitches, get him some reverses, maybe throw the ball out to him on a little screen here and there. The speed is definitely there. And again, like I said, I'm a little bit lower on him, but I like the pitch that you made here, and I might bump him up a little bit in my rankings just because speed is desirable. And when you look at Miles Sanders, I think 29 years old now, and Javonte Williams, a thick boy coming off some major knee injuries. Neither of them really have speed. Jaydon Blue is the only guy in this backfield with speed, unless we're still talking about Deuce Vaughn because he's got some speed too. But I don't know if he's
not gonna lie. I forgot
about him. Yeah. Yeah.
Forgot he was on the team.
Maybe that's why I'm low on Jaydon Blue, because we've seen the small, speedy guy in the Dallas backfield before, and it ended up being Deuce Vaughn. But Jaydon Blue,
Not like
a
this.
little
This is
bit bigger. He's a
Yeah, I was
better
gonna say
player.
this,
Yeah.
this is different. This is different. All right, let's get to the last one on here and let's get out of here. Dave talks about Kendre Miller, running back for the New Orleans Saints.
So the theme of this show is nobody's talking about these players, right? And like I haven't heard anybody talk about Kendre Miller. Like we're talking about our ADP here, and Kendre Miller isn't even being drafted in the top 300 whatever players that we have listed right now. Just turned 23 years old. I mean, this kid was so young coming into the league, and we know Dennis Allen just hated him, whether it was the injuries or I don't really know what it was, but this is one like, what are we as analysts, Alfredo, if we don't just love one player that we're just going to be obsessively truthing over year after year after year? And I guess that guy for me is Kendre Miller, because I loved what he did at TCU, got good draft capital, had good athleticism, and now we're looking at a backfield where I think Alvin Kamara is still the clear guy. I am well ahead of consensus on Alvin Kamara, hasn't really showed any signs of decline so far. But I think everybody is just excited about Devin Neal and has just said that Devin Neal is going to be the RB2 in this offense. He's the injury away guy. I wasn't the biggest fan of Devin Neal as a prospect, and I think that Kendre Miller is just a flat out better player. Still really young, like I said, just turned 23 years old, and he's only had 80 career attempts so far. And if you go back and look, he has put some nice things on film. Matt Waldman broke it down last year when he got his one spot start, where the jump cuts that he can make, his ability to run through and accelerate through contact. He's just a good player that hasn't really been given an opportunity yet. So completely forgotten about now at this point after 2 disappointing seasons, but I'm still going to the well and drafting Kendre Miller at the end of my drafts.
Yeah, I think he's suffering from like a little bit of that
Fatigue,
Dennis
maybe?
Allen stink.
That too,
I think
yeah.
there's the fatigue, there's the Dennis Allen stink who just like never wanted to play him. Then there's the fatigue of like hearing that he's the breakout, he's the sleeper, he's the late round guy. And we do that, and then eventually it happens. Like we need to come up with a name for this, by the way. Like a
Post-type
like
sleeper, I think is... Or are you talking about like the guy that like breaks out after everybody forgets about him? I think post-type sleeper, though. I think Kendre
actually
Miller
think it's
fall.
Well, what about like for the way that the fans treat it's like a Kyle Pitts syndrome, or we're just like we're just done with it.
Yeah.
We're just done with it at this point. Like we see it. There's potential, and we're just like, no, you're still tight end 18 in ADP. Like that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
I
think that's good.
I think that's where we're at with Kendre Miller. But I really, really liked him. Did you say Pittsitis?
Yeah, suffering from a bad case of Pittsitis.
I hate that I laughed at that. Kendre Miller, man, like I liked him. I liked him a lot coming out of TCU, and you're right. There's just like it's been so long, and there's just been so much of that fatigue on him that I think people have just forgotten, or they just don't care. And then there's the new hotness of Devin Neal coming in, but Devin Neal's another guy. It's like wasn't really fast, doesn't really use his speed. The hands are okay. Like he is the guy who is just like decent at everything. And I still remember talking about this so many times in the offseason leading up to the NFL draft that he kept comping himself to Alvin Kamara. And I'm like, dude, you weigh 20 pounds more. You don't catch the ball like that. And you're not nearly as fast. Like this is not the same player. I think he has an identity crisis. I'm not going to lie.
He got a 0 in the self-awareness column.
Yeah. Like what are we doing? Madden, check that. Yes, I think if we're talking about a guy that's going undrafted or late, like last round, or it's a deep draft, like Kendre Miller is a super fun pick there because I think the upside remains.
Yeah, and Devin Neal, 6th round pick, Kendre Miller 3rd round pick. I know we don't want to like hold on to draft capital after disappointing seasons, but comparing the prospects, Kendre Miller was a much better prospect and hasn't really been given the opportunity yet. So again, like I said, what are we if we can't just blindly be a truther for a player that we really like? Still just 23. Like I'm not holding on to this guy. Like, the age 30 breakout is coming. Like he's still a very young running back who can still figure it out.
Yeah. Well, there we go. 9 players, 9 running backs. Excuse me. Very undervalued in drafts right now that not enough people are talking about. And look at that. Secret's out. We kind of messed that up for everybody. But if you are watching the show or you're listening to the show, you're going to keep track of this and you're going to have a leg up on your fantasy league mates, because we're going to be doing this again next week as well with wide receivers. And like I mentioned before, we are going to continue having these episodes all throughout the summer. At some point, I think you and I are probably going to take like a little summer vacation trip, not together, but It's just each of us take some time off before the season starts. I spent enough time with you. But yeah, this was a good show. We're gonna be back again next week. As always, just want to thank everybody for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.